Hi all, it's Teresa in Gemma's house. Well, I finally finished my dry riverbed project in my backyard. This morning I took one more trip to the rock yard to get more rocks and pebbles, and I finished it up this morning. And I've only been able to work on this because of the heat for about 45 minutes to an hour in the mornings. So I'm glad this process is finished. It was a lot of work, but it really paid off. I have such a sense of accomplishment after this project. And I mentioned in a previous video that I love stones and rocks. And so to have this dry riverbed in my backyard, the rocks really contrast nicely with the green artificial turf. So it's just so nice to sit and look at it. So let me show you how I did it. So this is my yard when I originally put the artificial turf and gravel directly down on the dirt right before our rainy season started to keep the dirt down and so that Gemma and I could walk in the yard without getting muddy feet. After it started raining a bit, you can see the areas where they had laid the landscape drain lines, and those areas of soil weren't as compacted, so they sunk a little. But it gave me the idea to dig those areas out a little more and make a dry riverbed. So I cut the artificial turf in wavy lines, and I pulled those sections out so that they went all the way over to the fence. And I wanted to dig this area out so that it was a couple inches lower than the artificial turf, just to give it more interest and so that I can fill the dry riverbed with some river rocks and pebbles. So I wet the soil so I could see how the water flowed down to the drain and to see where the high spots were so that I knew where I wanted to dig the most. When it was raining some more, I had a good chance to see how the water flowed in the dry riverbed, and I had a couple low spots here. This is an area where they also had put drain lines for the gutter downspouts. And that was an area that I wanted to fill in so I didn't have this standing water when we got a lot of rain. When I started to dig, I had to keep watering this soil. I've mentioned a few times that we have really hard clay soil here. So watering it down made it a little bit easier to dig, and it also gave me a chance to see where the high spots were. I was glad I had a place to use this dirt that I was digging out of the dry riverbed. So this was just my back and forth process of digging out the dry riverbed and using the dirt to fill in these low spots under the artificial turf. I kept noticing that the drain cover was off, and I thought the wind was blowing it off, so I put a little rock on top of it. But do you see this clever squirrel? He took the rock off with his little paws and then took the drain cover lid off again. And I don't know if he was storing food under there or what, but it was so funny. I caught this on my bird feeder camera. So after I put the weed barrier fabric down, I started putting the pebbles down. I got these from my older daughter's backyard where she had taken a tree out of her backyard, and I saved as many of the pebbles as I could. And then those are some river rocks that I bought at the rock yard. So I went back to the rock yard and I got 2 different sizes of these Mexican black pebbles. And they're not really black, they're like a dark bluish gray. And I saw that the pebbles that I had taken from my daughter's yard didn't match those, so I knew I would have to mix them up with each other. At the nursery, I got these 5 decorative grasses, and I will just dig holes in the dry riverbed and position them in amongst the rocks. After I got this much of the dry riverbed done, it gave me a good chance to look at it and see how I wanted to finish this other half of the dry riverbed. I had this big fake rock from my previous house, so I decided to put it at this end of the dry riverbed, and I will surround it with other rocks. To the right of it, I wanted to create a little grass pathway. I'll have artificial turf on this little pathway, and that will give me a way to walk over to the fence, because I will probably have a lot of potted plants there eventually too. So I just scribed around this big rock so I could dig out a flat area for it to sit on. But before I got to that part of the dry riverbed, I wanted to get these potted plants into the ground around the rocks on the part of the dry riverbed that I already had finished. So I'm just digging this hole after I had filled it with water off and on all during the day to make the soil softer. And after I get the potted grass into the hole, I'm mixing some potting soil with the native clay soil. And I cut a piece of weed barrier fabric to fit this area. And I'm cutting out a star pattern so I can slip it over the top of the grass after I get it planted. I'm trying to prevent weeds from growing up around these decorative grasses. So hopefully this weed barrier will help. And then I'm going to fit the artificial turf around these plants also. And there will also be rocks surrounding these decorative grasses. Okay, so I got all the rocks that I have so far positioned in the dry riverbed where I think they look pretty nice. And I got all the other decorative grasses planted. Most of them are in or near the dry riverbed. This one I put in a planter. I might put it in a different location later. I'll decide that later. So I got the weed barrier fabric down on the rest of the dry riverbed, and so now it's time to go back to the rock yard. And not a minute too soon, because Supervisor Tessa wants this job to get done. And also Gemma, she would kind of like to have the yard finished as well, sometime at least before the rainy season starts again in the fall. Okay, so last night I cut a few more pieces of artificial turf to finish off this corner of the dry riverbed and around the tree too. So after a trip to the rock yard, I got 2 bags of different sizes of river rocks because they're less expensive than the Mexican black pebbles, and I wanted a variety of different sizes and colors of rocks too. So after I started laying the Mexican black pebbles, I realized I still didn't have enough rocks. So I took the river rocks that I had used to border a sidewalk on the one side of my yard, and I thought that they would have a better aesthetic value in this dry riverbed. So the last pebbles I'm spreading are the smallest size of the Mexican black pebbles. And they worked really well because they fell in between all the other size of pebbles and filled in the area really nicely. So one of my favorite things to do after working on these projects is to water everything and make everything nice and clean, get all the dust off from the rock yard. And I think it's looking really nice. I'm really happy with this work. I think one of the most important things here was to use a variety of sizes and shapes and colors of different kinds of rocks in this dry riverbed to make it look more natural. And interspersing some decorative grasses and other kind of plants too, add some green color among the rock colors. So this project was pretty difficult, so I'm really glad it's finished. I've been working on it for a few months now. and I think it adds a lot of appeal to an otherwise pretty flat backyard. So if you like this video, can you please give it a thumbs up? And can I ask you to also check my main Gemma's House channel page? And if you click on the videos tab, you can scroll through the videos and you might find something else that you're interested in watching. So as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate you watching, and please leave me a comment. Thanks again. Bye-bye.